Hey guys, welcome to the show. I can't believe this is happening. I'm so nervous, but that's okay because a little fear never hurt anybody. Welcome to the Declassified podcast, a place where you can come to hopefully be inspired and get fed spiritually, personally, and in your professional life. I'm your host, Danielle Fogarty. I'm 35 years old and I'm a multi-passionate creative with a deep love for people. I've always just loved people, storytelling, and helping others in general. I'm a photographer, a designer, an educator, and a proud, high-functioning extrovert. From a young age, I've just always loved people, like I said, and have been fascinated with hearing other people's stories and their unique backgrounds and how our pasts shape who we are in the present. And I hope to feature unique stories such as these here on this show, as well as cover topics about photography. I am a photographer by trade, so I feel like it just makes sense that a portion of this show will be dedicated to photography. But rest assured, if you're not a photographer or a content creator, this show is still for you. My goal for this podcast is for it to be jam-packed with value and educational content on a variety of topics, including social media, business, and self-help and development. Now, backing up a bit because I feel like a new introduction needs to be made. Most of you probably know me on Instagram as Danielle Ambry Photography, but I'm newly and happily married, and we are going to let my new last name shine on this podcast. So here we are. I cannot believe this is my first freaking episode. But before we dive in, I just want to start this episode from a place of gratitude by saying thank you to everyone who has supported this dream and has cheered me on from behind the scenes. You guys know who you are. Without you, I would not be sitting here with this microphone in front of my face. It's scary and new, but I'm determined to bring you guys value through this new platform. So help me give a warm welcome to the Declassified podcast. This has truly been a labor of love for the past month, and I thought really long and hard about what episode 1 should even be about. I know for me, when I listen to a podcast, I expect episode 1 to be sort of an introduction and a small taste of what the show is going to be like. So I thought it was really important to just start with a solo episode, just me and you, where I can share about why I even decided to start a podcast in the first place and what kind of episodes you can expect. So I want to dive into my journey, also my photography story, so you can get to know me a little bit better and where I've been so far in my life and my career up to this point. So like I said, my name is Danielle, but you can call me D, hence the name of the podcast, Declassified. Now, you may be asking yourself, why Danielle? Are you starting a podcast? Well, here we are in 2024, and I feel different, guys. I feel different as a woman, as a business owner. A lot has changed in my life. I've grown. I've gotten older, obviously, but I've grown personally, creatively, and professionally. And all around, I just feel a major shift. So there are logical reasons for this. I'm newly married, and recently I've walked through some really hard seasons that I've shared about openly on social media. Most of you here probably follow me on Instagram, and if you've followed me for a while, you've probably noticed this slight shift in my content. Sharing client work from weddings and engagement sessions and my branding work has slowly become infused with sharing more about my personal life, from caregiving for my father and his hospice journey and navigating my grief now after his passing, to most recently sharing about my husband and I and our journey to starting a family through IVF. And ultimately, this transparency that I've leaned into, while really hard at first for me to do, has kind of flipped a switch inside of me. It taught me the importance of shared experiences and the importance of human connection. When we feel connected, we ultimately feel less alone. And the more I've shared and opened up, the more you guys did as well. And in turn, you have shared your stories and your struggles with me in my DMs. And it just had me thinking, like, what's the purpose of life and the point of pain and hardships if not share them with each other for our own strength and for the strength of others? It's true what they say, your pain becomes your purpose. And I'm getting goosebumps even saying that because I've been through a lot in my life, and I want you guys to know that you can survive hard things too. Whether it's walking through grief or fertility struggles or losing your job and having to pivot careers or just starting a business, here on this podcast, I want us all to be able to grow together. So the why in this podcast is ultimately you guys, and it just makes sense for us all to grow into this new platform together that fosters intimate conversations and long-form content that doesn't cut me off every 60 seconds. Hi, Instagram, I'm talking to you. So now that you know the why behind the podcast, let's break down the name and what you can expect. So personally, I love the name. I picked it for two reasons because first, obviously, it includes my name, the letter D. People that are close to me and my friends call me D. John's family calls me Little D, which is like my favorite nickname. But it also has a metaphorical meaning. So to declassify something means to make something that was either previously hidden or unknown accessible to the public. And that's what I'm here to do, to pull back the curtain and share true stories from my personal life and from my guest lives, and to share personal stories of triumphs and hardships. And in the same spirit, there's no gatekeeping here. I'll be sharing my best business tips and strategies. You'll hear on topics like owning a creative business and entrepreneurship content, marketing, branding, the whole thing. Mindset is also a huge one. I'm big on positive self-talk because it can have a direct influence on every aspect of your life. We'll also talk about the ever-constant changing world of social media and the digital world we live in, staying up to date on marketing nuances, that kind of thing, photography, both the technical and the creative parts, and that's just scratching the surface. I plan on having a mix of solo episodes where we can chat one-on-one, supplemented with regular guest appearances with people who have something meaningful to say. And when I choose guests to be on the show, I really want to be intentional and not just focus on guests with status or either a big name or following, but rather someone with something meaningful to say that I believe could potentially help someone or change someone's life, maybe give somebody a perspective shift. We all have something to learn from each other, and I believe everyone has a story. So my promise is to always provide you guys value and to inspire and to be a positive place. Like friend to friend, we're just here vibing and growing together. Yes, we're going to talk about hard stuff. That's just part of life. I don't want to sit here and promote toxic positivity because it's not going to always be sunshine and rainbows. We'll get real, but we're always going to put a positive spin on it. My first identity is a Christian, so naturally my faith will be infused into this podcast. But hey, if you don't share the same faith with me, that is okay. You're all welcome to sit here at my table, even if we don't share the same beliefs. My commitment to you guys is bi-weekly episodes at the very least. I'm still kind of figuring out the schedule of the show and what I can realistically manage. So for now, new episodes are going to drop on Wednesdays. Please bear with me, and I know you guys will. I'm not exactly sure how this podcast is going to look. I might even stutter a lot, and I feel like I already have. But in 2024, we're embracing the anti-highlight reel, which means we're not trying to be perfect anymore, guys. I'm not perfect, and I'm not 100% sure how the show is going to look moving forward. But hey, that's kind of the fun of starting something new. And that reminds me, if you haven't already, go hit that follow button. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Go give this podcast a follow on Spotify and Apple Music. It really helps new shows like mine get some traction. And I'm sending you all my love and appreciation in advance. All right, so let's get into my story. We're going to take it all the way back to my childhood because how you were raised, your childhood ultimately defines your adulthood and who you are as a person. And I'm very blessed to say that I kind of had the all-American upbringing, middle-class, conservative household with two loving and so present parents. Technically, I am from St. Louis as I was born here, but I grew up in a small town in Mountain Home, Arkansas. My family ended up moving when I was just 4 years old. It was a career move by my parents so they could start a manufacturing company for their jobs. And it's crazy to think how that decision paved the way in my life, but I'm so thankful to have grown up in good, small town America. I made the best friendships there and have so many memories going to Bull Shoals Lake and Norfolk Lake, which are really popular tourist destinations. But that small town living, there's just something to be said about Southern hospitality and the emphasis on family and community. And as I've gotten older, that's really stuck with me. As a child, I had a lot of fun and I was super busy. And what I mean by that is I played all the sports. By the age of 6, my mom had enrolled me in everything under the sun. At one point, I was playing basketball and soccer, softball, I was swimming, and I was also doing dance and ballet. And I don't know how she did it, but I'm so glad she did. Because being involved in sports since I was really young, it taught me discipline, and it taught me work ethic, and it taught me to see things through because literally my parents parents would never let me quit anything. If you started something, you just had to finish it. And now that mentality plays a huge role in how I am in present day, both in my business and in my personal life. I finish things that I start, even when there are things that I don't necessarily want to do. And even when things get hard, I understand the importance of seeing things through to the end and keeping your promises to yourself. Playing a lot of sports when I was younger also had a major role in how active I am as an adult. Fitness and moving my body just kind of come second nature to me now. And it's because when I was a kid, I tried a bunch of different activities. And now that I'm an adult, I kind of do the same. I love distance running and lifting weights and yoga, taking workout classes with friends, and just moving my body in general. I was also a super creative kid, which I got from my dad. I loved to color and draw and take photos. There's like the cutest home movie of me circa 1991 at like 3 years old. And I'm going to visit Santa, and it's this cute video of me on his lap asking him for a toy camera for Christmas. And it's so crazy to think where that interest would take me 32 years later. That love for the arts and sports bled into my high school years, and eventually I just stick with playing basketball and soccer. I ditched all the rest, and I spent so much of my teenage years just traveling around the nation and playing on different traveling teams for basketball. My mom was my coach at one point, and my dad would handle like the gear. So he was like her assistant coach. And so he handled the gear and made the team uniforms and kept the stats. And looking back, they were the best team. They were the best example of what a team marriage should look like. I also played nationwide on the Arkansas State Soccer Olympic Development Program, also known as ODP. But despite really being athletic, my true love and passion was always art. I loved my art classes. I loved creating and getting feedback from my peers and my teachers. I even remember taking disposable cameras on our basketball trips and getting them developed by my dad and creating these huge scrapbooks that at the end of the year, all my friends and I would pass around, and we'd all laugh at the photos we took this year and put stickers in there and write cute notes to each other. And it was just so funny how I was always trying to create or infuse art into even playing sports with my friends. I even remember in middle school, I would draw flowers on my friends' hands with those gel pens that got really popular, and I would charge like 25 cents for a temporary flower tattoo. So I guess I've always kind of been a hustler in my own right. I loved school and I loved my friends, which made it even harder when my parents would lose their jobs my senior year in high school. And I was left with the decision to either, one, move back to St. Louis and finish my senior year with complete strangers, or two, I could graduate early and start college. In looking back, I can't believe I was so nonchalant about this decision, but I remember just feeling so convicted. Like, yes, I am going to finish high school an entire year early and just start my life. And so I did. I took extra classes both in person and online. And during that summer before the college year even started, I would take classes at the community college to get some of my gen eds out of the way. And by the way, if you're a college student and you're about to start college, which not everybody has to go to college, it just depends on what you want to do for a living. But for me, it was really beneficial. But save some money and take some of your gen ed classes at a local community college, because I can guarantee those classes aren't going to matter as much as the classes you take once you get down further into your college career, when you really nail down what your major is going to be. My love for both sports and the arts would pay off, as I was awarded 2 scholarships, one for soccer and one for art, which proved to be a hard decision because I couldn't do both. But again, I knew myself, and I knew the idea of going to go pro as a soccer player, as a career, just like wasn't appealing to me. And so I would end up choosing the art career and chasing my dreams as a creative, as an artist, because I've always been an artist at heart. So that's what I did. So I graduated at high school in 2006, and no surprise, I loved college. But when I first enrolled, I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do. Photography at this time kind of took a pause in my life, and I actually didn't pick up a single camera my entire college career or take a single photography class. All I knew going into that first year was that I was a creative and I liked art, but there was a problem. I couldn't really see myself making a living being an artist either. It's just hard, and I didn't see myself being that painter who spends hours in a studio on one painting, hoping that someone just happened to walk by said gallery that it was in and pay however many thousands of dollars it was priced. The odds just weren't there for me. I needed a little bit more stability in a career. It took me a solid semester before I finally figured it out and was introduced to graphic design. I loved graphic design and commercial art. There was something about being a graphic designer and working on logos and branding and marketing campaigns that just spoke to my urge to be creative, but also to be practical so I could make a living and actually pay my bills. So I would end up going for a bachelor's in fine arts and graphic design, which was my major, and I would end up minoring in business administration because it just felt right at the time. My college years were spent mastering the art of graphic design. I spent most of my days in the computer lab learning all the ins and outs of every Adobe program, Illustrator, Dreamweaver, Photoshop, you name it, I did it. I was also a student assistant to my graphic design professor, which proved to be a great way to make some extra money because all I had to do was hang out in the computer lab and work on my own projects and then help other students when they had problems themselves. So I also had some internships, obviously took art classes such as painting and sculpture, and surprisingly, I would also love my business classes that came along with my minor, specifically micro and macroeconomics. I always love studying people's buying patterns and why they purchase the way they do. So college was great up until my senior year, and I want to touch on a part of my life that not a lot of people know about, but I don't want to stay here for too long. So this is a suicide warning, so I want to put that out there. I'm only going to touch on this for a short amount of time, but if you need to skip ahead 30 seconds, please do, because it's a lot. I'm about to drop a bomb on you guys, but I feel like it's important so you guys can know who I am. During my senior year in college, someone that I cared for very much took their own life. I know. My boyfriend at the time, who I was living with, took his own life in our bed. We were living together with a shotgun. And I know that's a bomb to drop, and I promise I'm not looking for sympathy by sharing this. I just want you guys to understand who I am and why I am the way I am. Because people often ask me why I'm so positive and how I always have a good attitude and a positive outlook on life and a kind of a never quit attitude. And I look back to this point in my life as being that answer, how something so traumatic shaped me. I think about war and gruesome images people are left with in their head, and I experienced that. I was the one who found my boyfriend in the absolute worst state, something no one should ever have to see. But much like when my parents lost their jobs and I had to literally jumpstart my life and graduate early to start college, I told myself this wasn't also going to break me, that I wasn't going to stop my college education despite having lost someone so horrifically. Instead, I just leaned into my studies. I leaned into my purpose and finished what I was there to do, what I told myself I was there to do, to get a degree. I'm strangely very thankful for this chapter in my life because it taught me that I'm not a quitter. And when things get hard, I show up for myself. And it taught me that hard things are going to happen in life and you choose to either run from it or let it knock you off your course, or you can allow it to make you stronger. And I've always chosen the latter, and it's always paid off. I truly believe mountains are put into our lives so we can show others that they can be moved. In a later episode, I think I'll speak to that grief and how that grief ultimately taught me how to grieve for my father. But for now, we're just going to save that because there's a lot to unpack there. Eventually, I would end up graduating and I would move my happy butt back to St. Louis because keep in mind, my parents moved back to St. Louis when they lost their jobs when I graduated high school so they could find new ones. So I was kind of on my own in a different state during college. I went to the University of Central Arkansas, but when I graduated college, I would move back to St. Louis because that's originally where my family resides. That's where I'm from. And plus, I knew I had a higher chance of getting a job at a more larger and more notable advertising agency. But my dreams were crushed when I landed my first job out of college. Can we get a drum roll? Because I started at a car dealership. And I died a little on the inside, but that's the catch-22 you get when you get out of college, where every job that you apply for requires some sort of experience, but you have none. So you just have to take what you can get and climb the ladder. But just like with anything, you have to put in your time to show your dream agency or your dream job that you want to apply to that one, you're reliable, and two, that you can be creative within whatever constraints of whatever company you're working for. Eventually, I would land my dream job working at an advertising agency in downtown St. Louis. You know the kind, like laid back co-working spaces with comfy couches and every day is casual. You can bring your dog to work kind of vibe or drink a beer on a Friday. That was it. I felt like I had made it. I was on cloud nine. In that first year, I just soaked it all up. And we worked on fun projects for big brands like Anheuser-Busch, Oreo, Sour Patch Kids, 7-Eleven. One of my favorite projects was when Sour Patch Kids created a 7-Eleven Slurpee, and we got to visit all the stores in person and see our work in the real world. We won awards for that campaign, and it was just a really cool time. I made the best memories and built some great relationships working for that company. But after a couple years, I just felt like I was burning out. Now, I don't want to downplay marketing because it can be a very fun and rewarding industry, and I don't want to downplay the 9 to 5 because this country is built on people who work 9 to 5 jobs. But for me, it just wasn't it. And I felt like I was always designing something out of the need to try to convince somebody to either buy something, do something, consume something. And it kind of felt like tricking people. And that just wasn't my thing, which was why I started to gravitate towards branding jobs and designing logos because I felt like there was an element of storytelling involved and that there was a little bit more depth to the work. There's just so much that goes into branding a company, its persona, the messaging, color choices, assets, the whole thing. So I would take a stab at freelancing and I created an account on Upwork.com while still working my 9 to 5 and talk about even more of a burnout. I don't know about you guys, but working 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then getting home to work on your own projects for your own clients constantly felt like a tug of war between working on someone else's dreams and then working towards my own. I started to build resentment for my day job, and really that's no one else's fault but my own, because I did love that job and I loved working for that company, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't in my heart. And around this time, I also started to date a guy who was an entrepreneur, and he did own his own business and he was pretty successful. And I began to understand that yeah, I did value the flexibility and fulfillment that owning your own business could provide. I wanted to be a business owner so bad. I just didn't really know what that looked like for me, but I knew graphic design wasn't the answer. Graphic design just wasn't paying off. Quite literally, I was broke and in debt. I couldn't even afford my own apartment, and I was buying groceries on credit. That's really embarrassing to say, but it was true. So eventually my work started to slip. My boss saw my lack of passion, and in mid 2018, late summer, I still remember the day that he brought me into his office and told me that the company had to let me go. And it was such a pivotal moment in my life because at the time it felt like my world was completely crashing down all around me, like my life was over. I had just lost my dream job, or so I had thought at the time. But I couldn't see it at the time, but now I do with hindsight. It was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. But at the time, I went home and I would just bawl my eyes out because I really didn't know what to do. And I felt like the only option was to get back out there and to start putting out resumes to other agencies, but something just didn't sit right with me about that. I knew that graphic design wasn't my passion, which, holy cow, talk about feeling like an imposter because I'd spent 4 years in college to do this, so much money, but I knew that I was craving something so much more out of my career, something with so much more depth. So while that internal battle was happening, that previous relationship that I was in started to grow. I began getting more involved in his business and helping out. My OG followers know me from my Sunset Bluff days. Yes, I helped manage and run Sunset Bluff's wedding venue from around 2018 to 2021. I want to preface this whole thing first by saying how grateful I am for my time at Sunset Bluffs. Yes, it was hard. Yes, I worked my ass off, but just like with anything in life, God puts you on a path for a reason, and that path got me to where I am today. And I know that if I would have never stepped foot inside that wedding venue, I would not have a career today that means so incredibly much to me. So Full circle moment, because little did I know at the time, God was molding me and giving me all the tools that I needed to thrive in this industry that I now love. I learned so much and did so much during that time, everything from graphic design to building a website, managing client contracts, collecting payments, communicating with vendors, and doing showings for current brides and prospective brides, which would be literally a shoe-in later because I would do showings for the brides and then pitch to them that I was a wedding photographer. But I didn't just handle the marketing and client-facing work. I also did a bunch of grunt work at the venue too. And when I say this was a family business and we were all hands on deck, I mean, we were hands on. We hung double pane windows at like 1 a.m. in the morning. I helped pave concrete. I did asphalt work. We did flooring together. We painted walls, laid mulch, literally so much. And aside from those physically demanding construction worker type jobs, there was also the actual work for the weddings the venue was hosting. And this wasn't your typical wedding venue. No, we were an overnight facility. So that means you can come in and either pay a package to stay the entire weekend, like a 2-night stay, or you can do a smaller package and do a 1-night stay, or just do like a small Sunday wedding, like a day wedding. So as you can imagine, we held weddings every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, depending on whether someone wanted to pay for the full weekend or not. And I don't know if any of you have worked in the hospitality or Airbnb rental industry, but it's not for the faint of heart, especially when combined with weddings. I'm just sitting here picturing this one toilet that's just absolutely ruined with chunks of somebody's dinner, and I'll never truly look at marinara sauce the same ever again. But that's the kind of stuff I did, guys, and it was like every weekend. Like, wake up Friday morning, set up for a wedding, reception, and ceremony. I would turn around and photograph that same wedding, wake up on Saturday morning, clean the entire house and the reception hall. We had 2 buildings, so essentially flipping the entire property for the next wedding party that was coming in, and then turn around, set up for that day's wedding, round 2, and turn around and also photograph that same wedding, and sometimes have to wake up on Sunday and do it all over again. You can't even imagine the amount of laundry alone. It was pure madness, but I'm a firm believer that in life, doors open, and when they open, they only do for a brief period of time, so it's important to act when they do. So for me, when I lost my job, it slowly occurred to me over time that this was my chance to pivot. I remember working a wedding and watching this photographer work, and I saw her just kind of like standing off to the side after the ceremony, missing key moments of the bride and the groom, like being cute together and also like interacting with their guests after the ceremony. And it dawned on me that I was sitting there daydreaming about how I could do her job better than her and with more heart. And it just clicked. Like, I felt lit up like the first time in years, like a freaking Christmas tree. So I made the decision right then and there that I was going to be a wedding photographer. And I truly just went all in because I had no other option, no other job. I just bought an affordable camera that night and I started. And as I say, the rest is history. I would end up shooting my first wedding at Sunset Bluffs, and my first full year as a wedding photographer, I would shoot 18 weddings. The following year in 2020, despite the pandemic, I'd photograph another 36, and not just at Sunset Bluffs either, but at this time, my name started to grow in the St. Louis area. My Instagram was also starting to get some traction, and in 2021, I continued and photographed another 37 weddings. And I remember thinking to myself during this 2021 season, like, wow, Danielle, now you've made it. You did it. I was making more in my photography than I ever was in my full-time graphic design job, like literally triple. I went from earning less than $40K a year to well over $150K, and it all just happened so fast. I was working my ass off, learning the ins and outs of the wedding industry and how to be a successful business owner. I saw mistakes and learned not to make the same ones, and I saw times when success had, and I took notes, and honestly, I grew a lot in those 3 short years. And I didn't really see anything going wrong until about 2021, going into 2022, where I found myself just completely overworked, completely overextended. My business was built quick. I had hustled my ass off to create that foundation, but I was still operating like it was year 1, and I was saying yes to every project. My mental health was starting to go on the decline, and that relationship that I had been in had ended the year prior. We were more like business partners, truly. And I just found myself completely drained after the 2021 season with a full calendar of bookings going into the next year. So 2022 proved to be a really pivotal year for me. I would end up meeting my now husband, and that new healthy relationship would start to blossom, all the while shooting 45 weddings that year, which still blows my mind that I did that and I survived, because I don't know if you guys know, but there's only 52 weekends in a year. So there was a lot of double header weekends, a lot of triple headers where I was shooting like 3 weddings in a weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was absolute madness. But that year taught me a lot. And it was a transition period for me, because when my previous relationship had ended, even though it was for the best, it's always hard closing a chapter and starting something new, especially when you've built a business surrounding a lifestyle with someone. So when we went our separate ways, it just led me to dive into my work as a coping mechanism, because that fear of financial uncertainty just had me kind of like uneasy, and it had me trying to fill my entire calendar. But when my husband, John, came into the picture, everything changed. And I always call him my rock, because he introduced me to the love and stability that has forever changed my life for the better, and taught me as a business owner the value of time and my worth, and to prioritize quality over quantity. Because guys, burnout is so real. And that's what that year taught me, because if I was overextended and my cup was running empty, I wouldn't have anything further to pour into my clients. And it was a major mindset shift that I realized. Relationships are more important, and I needed to focus, like I said, on quality over quantity. And I think it's a really easy mistake that photographers and just business owners in general can run into when you're starting a business, because you have to hustle. I mean, what's the alternative? Potentially failure, or closing your business, or not being able to make your bills. So that motivation in the beginning can keep you saying yes and taking on more. And that over time, that mindset can be rooted in scarcity. But when you've built the foundation of your business, that needs to change. So for every business owner, there needs to be a moment where you flip it and start operating from a mindset of abundance, because you've built that foundation. So fast forward to last year, we've made so much progress, guys. I shot 35 weddings, and I was even more fulfilled than the previous year with less on my plate. Who knew? And in 2024, I've scaled back even further, which is crazy to me, but I'm so proud to say that I'm serving 20 lovely couples for the 2024 season, and that is allowing me to pour into other areas of my business, like teaching other photographers and my branding work and education, and starting this podcast even. So that brings me to where we are today. And to be honest with you, I've always just kind of been like meh about my story, because I know not everyone has the same journey in photography. Sometimes it's hard to get your name out there. It can be frustrating. You can feel unseen in a lot of ways. And I know my situation is a special one. I didn't have to second shoot much, but rather I was just a trailblazer, because I was working at a wedding venue while also growing my name as a wedding photographer. So just know that your story might not look the same as mine, and that's okay. Photography is such an amazing industry, and there's so many different niches and ways to make money. And at the end of the day, I just hope my story inspires you. I hope it inspires somebody. You guys have the power. You may fall or mess up, but that's okay. Failure never hurt anyone. And for me, if I'm being honest, all my failures have just made me a stronger person and a better photographer. And wow, that's it. That was a super transparent first episode, but I just want you guys to know me. I can't believe I'm going to publish this thing, but like I said, I want you guys to know who I am. I want you guys to know my heart, who I am as a person, and I hope you guys got something out of this episode. So give me your thoughts, give me your feedback, shout out this episode and your stories on Instagram, send me a DM, write a review. I just love to know what you guys think, and any topics you want me to cover in the future, guests you'd like me to feature. I'm so excited to take this journey with you guys, and I just want to thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next week.